We're back with Dave Endacott of Atkinson Landscaping to talk about stratas and getting bang for buck. Welcome, Dave.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Thomas.
Tell me a little bit more about Atkinson and when you guys came together.
Atkinson Landscaping. Okay, well, we're located in Surrey, BC. We're technically coming up on our 10-year anniversary.
All
Started
right.
in 2015, but that's let's say a soft launch 2015. I'd say 2018 is when we incorporated and really hard launched it. So
Yeah.
we haven't really talked internally, but I'd say our 10-year anniversary we'll save for 2028 just to be fully proper there.
Okay.
Yeah, we're a full service landscaping company. We do a lot of strata work, and that's our primary focus. We also do a lot of construction work and snow removal services.
Oh, fantastic. So, covering the full range. And today we're going to dive into a whole bunch of different facets of landscaping and what it means for these communities. How many people are there on your team today, Dave?
Yeah, it's a good question. Being a seasonal, business, we vary, but
Mhm.
right now we just actually had a little Christmas breakfast party this morning. I want to say we had 18 of us there, and then
Great.
come spring we could hit as high as 30, but probably likely in the 25 range.
Oh, fantastic. Good. Okay, so I'm going to give everyone a preview of the last slide as I flick over, and then we're going to move back to the top. There's a bit of before and after that you get to look at afterwards, and it's a very impressive. But let's take it back to the beginning. When you're starting off, how do you establish this scope and create the right groundwork for effective communication when working on a project like this?
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, no matter what kind of work we're doing, like strata maintenance work for the annual contracts, we're doing one-time projects, or we're doing the winter servicing, like setting those clear expectations from the get-go is so important. And I would say much more difficult than you might assume. There's a lot of nuance to properties and types of builds. Um, but primarily, with like a strata maintenance plan, we kind of have we have our standard scope that everyone gets, and we have some rigidity there. Like we believe we've created a plan that serves our stratas as best possible, and then we make the stratas that we're onboarding fit that plan, and then we'll make some edits within that depending on what the strata's needs are. But getting that scope clear, I would say it took many years to figure out all the timing of different, treatments for the lawn, different pruning timing. Also, just with like availability of manpower and seasonality, like all of those come into play to create a plan, and that's very difficult. And I'd say early on there was a lot more reactive landscaping we did, right? Like we'd show up and laurel hedge was overgrown, so we're shearing laurel hedges that day. Where now we try to limit the reactionary servicing and be a lot more proactive with our, planning for the year. So it was a bit of a
Fantastic.
long explanation there, but maybe drill down on that a little bit more where you have questions.
Yeah, for sure, we will. I noticed that this lovely AI generated image has two autumns and a snowflake on one of them. So that's
That's
what you get
okay.
sometimes when you go AI. But we do have a winter season. It's later than normal this year. Hasn't been very cold.
Not
Um,
yet.
Not yet. Yes, the critical point about that is not yet. Um, let's talk about what it is you do when you get onto site to help a strata understand what it is they should be expecting, where they may have been dissatisfied with their previous provider.
Yeah, totally. So let's say the scenario is we get a request for a proposal and we go meet with the strata. So we're not servicing it yet. We're
Yeah.
just doing a walkthrough. So during that walkthrough, really trying to understand their needs and why they're switching companies, right? There's many reasons they're switching companies. We've even heard it like, the company we're using is going out of business. They're not doing strata maintenance anymore. Could be a lack of service that they feel they're getting. Oftentimes it's the price they're paying for the service. So trying to gauge, what their pain points are. And then through that walkthrough, really educating and understanding, like, are we a good fit? Because, we'll get complaints often of, in the fall, it'd be like, well, they're not picking up the leaves or whatever. And so for us, we have an action plan where we clean the leaves on a rotational basis. So every week we do a section of the property, the main areas, and a few other specific areas, but we might be leaving the backyards that are lower visual till later in the year.
Right.
So try and understand if that works for our client, or if their expectations are every, you could technically in the fall have someone there every day picking up leaves, but if you wanted to go that route, your budget would be crazy. So trying to understand their needs, explain what we're offering and what to expect, and see if that's a good fit. And then just go over other pain points or items that come up. Another really common thing we'll hear is like, our landscapers are here every week, but we have no idea what they're doing. So we try to with as much, like, there's some nuance week to week based on weather, so we can't always say like, hey, here's your weekly plan for the year.
Yeah.
But we try to give them big chunks. So in the late winter, early spring, we're going to be doing most of our pruning. Through May and June, we're going to be trying to stay on top of mowing and weeding our beds. That's going to be our primary focus. June through July, we're going to do like final shearing before the heat comes. September, we're going to start focusing on leaf season. So trying to give them that kind of, I don't know what I would say, like the 10,000-foot picture of what our plan's going to look like, and then hold that control a little bit of the week-to-week servicing.
A big difference, I think, depending on your geography. You talked about how you can't plan to the week because of uncertainty. Obviously, it's difficult to mow a lawn if it's soggy and has been all rained on. It's very different in different parts of North America. You go to California and it sprinkles, and I mean barely sprinkles, and all the gardeners go home. Like those are not working conditions. Very, very funny to see how that varies. You've got a point up on this slide about regular and transparent communication and an assigned manager. Can you talk me through what that means for a community like this?
Yeah, totally. I think it's on a later slide, but sort of the draft of our contract there. You don't need to flip.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we'll get to that.
But from the get-go, we try to, it's such a battle because we don't want to send a 20-page document outlining our plan. So we try to make the summary of what we're going to do on the onset and give that to our clients. They have a rough idea what it's going to look like in the year. And then throughout the year, every quarter, we send a quarterly report. And the quarterly report is maybe a 4-page document. And it just says what have we done the last quarter? What are we doing the next quarter? And then, we might say even, weather was so bad we're behind on our pruning, so we're going to be doing more pruning through the next quarter than we normally would. It might include details like that. And then it would also include any quote opportunities we see. So especially safety hazards, if we see any patios with tripping hazards, slipping areas, anything like that, we try to highlight those for our clients and include quotes. And then just even things that we see coming down the pipeline. So a common one for stratas would be, hey, your strata's 20 years old and the fencing is starting to fail. And that's something you should have in your budget sometime in the next couple of years, because it's going to be a big ticket and it's going to need to be replaced. So we obviously do that a little bit because we want to be getting those contracts when they need service work. There's some selfishness to it, let's say, but I find that really helpful for our clients to know that we're looking out for their property.
That's true. I think you're the kind of eyes right out there seeing it all unfold. Do you guys do fence related work or?
Yes, it isn't our primary service by any means, but we do it often because we'll be, doing someone's backyard, and part of that's the fencing. And we would definitely do a fencing contract if we're replacing all the fencing in a complex or something like that.
Oh, interesting. Good.
Yeah, if we had a resident call us and they just needed 2 fence panels replaced, we might refer that outward. But typically, it's a service in our wheelhouse.
We'll get into some of the stuff around scope creep and other things later, but in terms of having an assigned manager, is that someone that the strata council or the property manager would reach out to if they had concerns, or what does that person do? And okay.
Yeah, so we want all of our stratas to have a direct point of contact and a separate line, email, all of that, than our general line, because we don't want them getting passed around. We don't want our office not knowing who it is or whatever. We want someone who has a relationship with our clients and can answer all their questions. And so all our stratas, have an assigned account manager. And pretty much that's for the property manager or the people on council to reach out to with any questions. And we've actually internally kind of changed the name of the account manager to the relationship manager. We really want our account manager to be proactive in knowing the members of council, creating level of comfort in that relationship, so the council knows that they can reach out to them anytime. And I think that just makes more smooth sailing for everybody, both us and the client.
Yes, for sure. You've got trust, and then you've got that accountability, and it does become obviously something that is a win-win for the strata and for you guys if you're able to forge that relationship.
Totally.
You talked about these quarterly updates. I think they sound great. Do you get much feedback on those, or are those more informational?
It depends. Like some councils, a lot of feedback, and sometimes no feedback. But I would say it's more site to site than
Mhm.
report to report, if that makes sense. So the sites
Yeah,
that
for
always
sure.
reply to it, and the sites that never do, never do. Um, the thing we're working on internally, we haven't perfected this yet, is on every one of our sites having the property manager's info and then a secondary contact who's on Strata. And then they
Right.
both get that report and can distribute it as they feel necessary. We've made the assumption that some of our property managers, it never gets past them to the councils. And so I don't want to blame our property managers. They have a lot going on, but
They do,
it,
yeah.
like, especially if it feels like um, like a newsletter email, like I could see it just being archived. So we're trying to get more points of contact to make sure that gets to council. Because we've even had that as recently as this last couple of weeks on some renewals where one of our clients was like, well, why haven't you informed us about some dead plants? And we're like, well, this has been on like every report for the last 6 quarters. And then he's like, okay, send that to me. And we send it to them. And then
Right.
he wasn't aware that we were sending those. There's a bit of a different scenario with a newer manager in the at the site, but
We
just
both can appreciate how many emails and how much correspondence property managers receive. So the fact that that sometimes doesn't make it through is a reality of the burden that they're under. That you guys are trying to proactively find those relationships is good. How many of the stratas you work with have a landscaping committee in your kind of estimation, Dave?
yeah, that's a great question. I don't know. I'd imagine about
Hmm,
half. Like usually
that's
a
interesting.
landscape
Yeah.
liaison, I would think that. And I think usually we see let's say the stratas that have a contract of more than 50,000 or 80,000. I think they're more likely to have a landscape liaison or something, where those smaller
Right.
ones we don't see it as often. So I think if we were doing primarily large, like 100,000 plus contracts, we'd see a lot more of them.
And that's interesting, right? It is the dynamic of strata life and living. You've got a council that's consisting of volunteers. The larger the community, the more potential volunteers you have. Not everyone wants to be on strata council, but some have areas of interest. And whether that be related to building community or to landscaping or other, it's great that people can contribute in the ways that they feel that they can and that they're most engaged.
Totally.
Nobody would want me on their landscaping committee, but I think my wife would love it and enjoy being part of it. So, yeah, that's interesting, Dave.
Yeah.
Um, so you've got this element of communication. What other challenges and improvements do you guys try and make or try to communicate when you're dealing with strata communities?
Well, one challenge we really have is like people who live in stratas who aren't on council and don't know the details of the contract, like requesting things, because we're trying to balance, like, we always have a focus on the client experience. Wow, every customer is one of our core values. But then, like, you'll also just get like some random person who's no one's ever met from unit 33 upset because you haven't pruned their U hedges. And then, like, they don't know the details of the contract. Is like, we don't do the limited common area. So we don't do the air, like their backyards. Right. And then it's kind of like this tension where it's like, well, I want to like be helpful, but if we do this for everybody, we're going to make no money. And so we've been trying, I guess, to some success, but figuring out like, oh, when we send out our contracts, would it be good to see if to get the property manager send it to all the residents? So then like everybody knows that like we don't do X or whatever. And then that at least gives some clarity. And then the contracts we have, our guys on site also have access to. So at least it creates sort of a instruction manual. But I'd say
Yeah.
that can be a challenge. It sometimes feels like a lose lose, right? It's like, if you just tell them like, no, we're not going to help you, then it doesn't leave a good impression. And if we spend all day cleaning a random unit, then other
you
people.
don't make any money, and your
Yeah,
other clients suffer because you weren't budgeting that time.
totally.
Uh, have you come to terms with sometimes groups of owners or owners about doing some of their limited common property? Is that a thing?
Um, Not a thing we've done really. We would do like, let's say a unit wants a patio installed. By all means, we would quote that.
Right.
I
Yeah.
know there's other companies where they've had the scenario where the contract doesn't include the personal yards, so limited common property. And then let's say 4 units, like maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's a more elderly couple or whatever. They're like, can we just pay you additionally to do our unit? Um, we have not done that so far, and I would like to do that for the customer experience aspect of it, but logistically it's challenging, right? Like, especially if
Yeah.
you think we have, let's say one of our foreman manages 20 sites and 20 sites have 100 units each to like make those notes on these specific units, need this extra servicing and what that servicing looks like. So not
Yeah.
something I would be opposed to doing in the future. I just think logistically I think on paper it seems really easy. On
And in
actuality,
reality, it's
it's really
hard. Yeah,
tough.
and you can't do it ad hoc. It would have to be something that was planned, and it was like an annual service or something where it could. Yeah. Anyway,
But
I
yeah,
just was curious whether that happened, and I can see it happening in my community.
yeah, I think we would
Um,
always try to serve the client if we could. I know in one scenario, and I don't even want to say this because it's probably something we wouldn't do in the future, but there's a couple who needed some help, and one of our staff like did it after hours for them, and they just paid them cash, and we just kind of sort of
right.
said like, we'll just like that's okay, like we just want to take care of you. So like the reason I tell that story is I want to put an emphasis on our willingness to try to make exceptions for people. But I would say that wasn't the ideal solution. It just worked in this, specific example.
I think that's very understandable, and it's very nice that you and your employee were able to make it happen for that couple. I mean, there's always unique and special circumstances, and I think that it's nice that you were able to meet it in that case. I get that that's not scalable, but maybe there are opportunities for you in the future.
Yeah.
You did want to bring up some of this contract. And I know it's small for people, but that's not really the point. I think what I noticed when I looked at this, and this is the guts of your proposal and contract, is how clean and simple it is in the sense of having very clearly defined services and sections, and then the opportunity for you to go over those site specific notes under each. Can you talk us through that a bit, Dave?
Yeah. So again, this is kind of the 10,000-foot view of what we do, but these are all of our services just broken down into the most simple form. So, mowing, weeding, pruning, fertilizer, lime, and the leaf cleaning. And then under it, we just write a little description of what we're doing, especially pruning. That's a very nuanced, service, right? Like it's hard to say like all our pruning happens in June or whatever, right? Because all plants have different needs, but we try to give as general scope as we can to our clients. But the thing I want to highlight here that I think is important is under each service, well, each service is checked off. So it's just like by default, we check it off so that clients know that's included. But sometimes, we have one contract where we don't do any weeding. So we'd uncheck it for that client. So just to really make transparency for what the client signing off on and for our guys on site. But then each service has a site specific notes. And this came about because we had one strata where we didn't do the limited common areas. So we didn't do the backyards. We didn't weed them. But then from the neighboring property, we had blackberry growing over the fence. And they were like, well, you're going to clean up the blackberry. And we're like, well, we don't weed these. And blackberry is more closely to like a weed family. But then there's an argument about the pruning. And so we ended up just doing it because we're like, okay, no problem. There's a miscommunication. We'll make sure the blackberry is taken care of. But
Yeah.
if everything worked perfectly now, what would happen was whoever did the estimate would walk through. Hopefully, they would notice blackberries coming over the yard, and the client might say, like, oh, don't worry about the backyards. We'll take care of them. And then our estimator would say, okay, I noticed blackberries growing over. Do you want us to take care of that? And they'd be like, yeah, but we expect that. And then we'd put that in the site specific notes. Although we're not doing limited common area, we will take care of the blackberry growing in from the neighbor's yard. And we would highlight that. So it's like extra clear for everybody. And then that gives us a level of protection, but also gives us a level of accountability to make sure we are doing what we agree to. And so we just started using this contract in the last couple of months. It's an update from our last one, but I'm really optimistic about the value this will provide.
I
So
like it. It's really clear. And if you are talking about bang for buck, you know exactly what you're going to get in terms of bang before you sign that contract. And
totally.
that's really critical. You've got the section that's highlighted in red because it's got some very specific services that could be added on if they wanted them. So you guys do winter services, you do some of that other work on irrigation and whatnot.
Yeah, I see it's hard to see with on this screen what's written behind that highlighting. And typically we just have that highlighted. So when we fill out the contract, we know that's an area we need to edit on here.
Yeah.
So if our viewers are having trouble reading that, we do format it a little nicer when we send the actual copy. But being of like, I think I hit on this at the start, like where we want to grow as a company is more strata contracts and more strata maintenance. But I find it important, or I imagine it's important that we can be a full service company. So they don't need to worry about, they need someone to service their irrigation. No problem. We can do that. They have dead plants. We can replace those. Their fence is failing. We can replace that. The snow removal, we can give proposals and contracts for that. So we try to make, like, in the ideal world, we're your people and we're taking care of everything grounds related. And then it's obviously, again, an advantage to us if we can quote these on the onset and bring more value, I mean, to our client for sure, but also create more revenue for our company from an individual client. And to me,
Yeah.
it's a win-win, right? Like, we want to do your irrigation startup. We know where the irrigation heads are. We know where, we know the property, we know the system, so we can do it more effectively. And then it's also easier for us to schedule because we're already on the site. We already have contacts there and stuff.
And for the viewers, do you guys bring in arborists as needed, or do you have some on your team?
So our contract, we do up to 15 feet in height on all our trees and bushes and stuff. And that's like mostly for insurance purposes. In-house, we don't have an arborist, but we do have a couple arborists we work closely with. So
Great.
depending on the scenario, we'll just get a quote and take care of it, or we'll refer our clients to the arborist and they can work with them directly. It's just situational how we handle that.
Wonderful. No, it's just good. That's one of those big complicated things. When a strata gets proposals, and sometimes they're out there, they're seeking, they'll get two or three of them. How are they supposed to sift through and determine price versus value and what that all means?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we're seeing this more and more. And I think it's just there's less work out there than maybe there was a couple of years ago, but a lot more when we give proposals. They get 3, 4 proposals, and we've seen it. Like, we did a quote, and our quote was, let's say, 20,000, and the one that won it was 10,000, and one of the competitors was 30,000. So to see that type of range on pricing, it wasn't exactly, it was like 9,000, 18, and 31 or something, but to see that type of range in what's being quoted is, I mean, to me, it's concerning. It's like, well, we should be more aligned. Like, there shouldn't be, it's common there might be a 20% variance in pricing, but 100% increase from quote to quote is crazy. And my point here would be, I think there are some companies out there that have lower charge out rates. They have less overhead. Maybe they're more of a one-man show kind of idea. And so they're not carrying all of those expenses other companies are. And so if you can get one of those companies and they do a good job, then that could be a good fit. I find with those lower cost providers, you're probably not going to get the same experience you will with someone who's more established, where you're going to get an account manager, you're going to get reports, you're going to get that kind of thing. But they still might be doing a good job. It might just be harder to get in touch with them and know what they're doing. The point that I was more making on this slide is, I think at the end of the day, a good chunk of the companies are probably in a similar range for charge out rates. So this isn't our charge out rate, but just for a simple example, let's say all the companies charge $100 per hour and we have a quote for 10,000, the competitor has a quote for 5,000. It might be an indicator that they're accounting for a lot less hours on site than we're accounting for. And we have a lot of internal systems and softwares we use to track the needs of our stratas. And so I would say we have a pretty good idea when we onboard a strata of how many hours are needed to service that site. And if there's a big gap in that quote that stratas are receiving, it may be that that other company isn't accounting enough hours on site to maintain the property properly, and that might lead to a lot of issues for the clients down the road. Now, I totally get it. If you're looking at a quote for 9,000 or 31,000, you're like, well, even if this company does a really bad job, we have $20,000 to like,
To fix
spend
whatever's
to
wrong.
fix whatever the problem is. But if it was a smaller gap and you go with a cheaper company, it can create a lot of problems, right? Replacing plants is really costly. So, if you're seeing a lot of plant die off because not proper maintenance, if things are pruned incorrectly, like we see a good example would be like on a ton of our stratas, we have cedar hedges, super common plant. Like if you
Yep.
cut too far into a cedar hedge and back to that dead growth, like it'll never rejuvenate. Like
It
more
never
often,
comes back.
yeah,
There are
like
some in my neighborhood, Dave, you drive by and you are looking in at the inners of that, and it's never coming back.
totally. So, and that's common with cedar trees. So if you have a 10-foot cedar hedge and it's a beautiful hedge and there's 100 plants and they cut into that dead wood, like that hedge is done. And like you typically can't source cedars that are that big. And like an 8-foot cedar would be probably $70 a plant. It's like, oh, you could do a lot of damage really quickly with someone who, isn't caring for it properly. And then the other thing would be if they didn't have enough hours and the site got overtaken with like invasive weeds, blackberry, that kind of thing, you could have a huge bill to get that caught up. So again, I will recognize I have a bias. Like oftentimes there's a bitterness when we quote a job and we lose it to someone who's more cost effective. So I recognize I'm, not a, I recognize I have a bias, but I would just caution people that, the lowest cost option could come with some catches that could cause issues down the road.
We talk about this a fair bit. We don't think it's healthy for anyone to run a race to the bottom. It
Mhm.
is healthy to have competition. Price is what you pay and value is what you get, and they are not always 100% aligned. That 31,000 might not deliver the value that you could get out of something between that and the $9,000 quote. There is trade-offs that communities have to make, but they can be costly if they are going for just the lowest cost quote, especially in an environment where the barriers to entry are very low. And landscaping doesn't take a huge amount as a business to get started. What takes time is that experience and that expertise, as you were alluding to, switching from reactive to very proactive, having a good plan, responding to the weather. And somebody who's coming in new with low cost might not be providing the experience and be learning as they go, which is fine, but it can come with costs to the
Yeah.
community.
Yeah. I would just add one more thing to that.
Please do.
I think there is an item that goes unforeseen and it's a liability item. And so making sure with those more cost effective companies that, they are carrying the right insurance coverages, right? WCB, all of those
Yep.
items, but also like it hasn't happened to us, which I'm thankful for, but I've heard for other companies, like somebody walking on the sidewalk and slipping on a pile of leaves and then creating a lawsuit to the strata of like they weren't regularly maintaining their gardens, and the companies I talked to being like, well, here's our service records, here's when we were here, here's our plan, and then those lawsuits being dropped. And so just even like that's a way more common thing in snow removal. Like if you're hiring a snow removal company, make sure they have proper reporting, make sure they know when they're gonna be on site, make sure they have GPS trackers, all those things. It's a higher
Right.
lawsuit industry, but even with landscaping, it is a thing, right? Like, so in some ways you are paying for a service because you want clean landscapes, but you're also paying for a bit of an insurance policy. So
And that is important. Strata insurance is very expensive. If you're relying on that, your costs will go up over time. Your deductibles and premiums will rise. That does cost everybody in the community. And so, yes, that's a very good point. And I think that property managers know and have that as a key criteria. When
totally.
they're seeking quotes, it's a bit different for those that are living in detached homes who may not be aware of the significance or importance of that.
Yeah.
I have on our screen now a very intent looking Atkinson team member.
Oh yeah. Dial.
Yeah, dialed right in. And that is a beautiful hedge that he's trimming. So, talk to us about how you plan and prevent these sort of lapses in care, and what can happen if you neglect, well, to prune your cedars or anything else.
Yeah. Well, I'd maybe focus on weeding here because it says weeding there. And I think this is actually
Yeah.
really common is so our cadence on weeding our garden beds or our garden servicing in general is we do a section each week and we break the site into 3 sections. So essentially every third week, all the properties, well, and it's a 3 week rotation. So every 3 weeks, everything's being weeded. And what we would what we've found is like within that 3 week time, the weeds that grow haven't started spreading yet. But if there's a section of beds that is left longer than that, those weeds can start to spread and leave their seeds, and they can start to take over beds. And when I talked about invasive weeds a little bit and talked about blackberry, but
Mm.
trying to think of like even like a buttercup or a clover or whatever, like it has a really like webbed root system, and so if that's left on accounted for, it can really take over, areas of garden, which can lead to, plants dying if it chokes them out, but mostly like aesthetically can look really bad and then require a lot of,
Interesting.
work to get back to. So regularly staying on top of that and making sure there's a weeding plan in place, I would say is really important. And then to speak to the pruning end of things, again, cedar is an important one. Make sure it's done every year because you can't just decide like, well, at my house, I've got like some 20-foot cedars. I moved in here. I didn't let them get this far, but I would love to make them way smaller, right? But you just can't. Like we've lost that opportunity. So now we're at the restart phase if I want something smaller. So you just have to be mindful of that. If plants get neglected, they might become too mature for an area. They might become really woody, and then you're looking at replacement at that point. So
Yeah.
very important.
Crazy. And then on lawn care.
Uh, yeah, the mowing is really important, right? For health of lawn, regular cutting is key. If you cut off too much of the grass blade, it causes stress to the lawn, and so I mean, even in this photo where we might be pushing it, but it is common. Like see lawns, you maybe see this more residentially or
You do,
detached.
yeah, that burn at the
Well,
bottom or
yeah,
whatever.
well, where it grows up to 8 inches, it's cut down to 2 inches, and then like that just stresses the lawn out a lot. So I mean, my parents are a great example. They want to cut their lawn as little as possible, say let it grow as high as they can get it, and then they hack it down to nothing. And they're like, well, it's less work for me, which it is, but their lawn looks like garbage. And so just knowing like there's some issues with letting it grow that much. And so weekly is like, I mean, to be honest, from a real turf management standpoint, or if you're at a golf course, like weekly isn't even enough mowing. Like you could mow twice a week, but
Yeah.
you again would be at a point where,
The
you'd be
cost
blowing
is,
the
yeah.
cost, right? Um, and then I just say another thing with lawn care, like we sharpen our lawnmower blades regularly. That's important too, because you want to cut the grass, you don't want to rip the grass. And so
Right.
that kind of falls in here. Um, Weed and pest management, aeration overseeding, fertilizers. So we have a fertilizer plan that comes standard with our package, as well as the aeration and liming. Um, Overseeding and watering would be additional. So obviously, if they have an irrigation system, watering is important. But we do have in our area like our watering restrictions make it difficult. So during the season when we need to water, we can usually only water for like 1 or 2 hours a week. And if you have a big strata, like you just can't get to every area. And so
Yeah.
I think it's more learning to work with the restrictions we have there, if that makes sense. And just
As we get into your case studies, I'm thinking, not only do we have a difficult climate and water restrictions, we have stratas which are generally large buildings, and areas that don't get enough sun or consistent sun can be problematic. And I lived in Cole Harbor for a few years when I was younger, and there was one side of our strata that had, well, we could call it a lawn. It was always, brown and dead. It would not ever grow and stick. And so as we get into your case studies, I think there's just some practicalities behind them. Can you talk us through these?
Yeah, totally. Well, to just kind of piggyback off what you were saying, like water restrictions are really hard for our lawns, and then also like the grubs that we're having now, the chafer beetle and the crows and raccoons eating at the lawns, make it extremely difficult to get lawns to grow. And then past that, shaded areas, like you can buy shade seed grass. I would make an argument that like grass by default is a sun plant, like it needs some sun to thrive. Now, if there's some turf grass experts on here, they might push back on that statement. That would be my statement. And then so you get these lawns that are between buildings, they're never getting sun, they've got grubs in the lawns, and we aren't able to water them. And then the next kind of thing we battle with lawns would be traffic, because you don't want a bunch of traffic on your lawn. But then you get these small yards with a lot of people have young families or they have pets, and it's like you're probably never going to have a lawn. Like, just accept what you have. So if we get a call from someone who lives in a strata who wants their grass to come back, we pretty much just tell them, like, if you want it to be green, probably fake grass. If you want real grass, then probably like don't use it ever and really up your maintenance practices. So that preamble kind of leads into what we're seeing here. So this first photo, the before, this area being right next to the concrete, what we probably were seeing was those areas, if they're in a lot of sun, they can burn out really quick because that sun or that concrete grabs so much heat.
Right.
And then you also see being on the sidewalk, probably a lot of animal traffic and probably a lot of dogs peeing on it. And so you get these areas that in my mind don't look great and require maintenance. Our clients aren't necessarily stoked on the service, and we're always battling it. And then so we converted this to, river rock and mulch area, and I think this is a really good application for it. Obviously this creates way less maintenance. Now, having these, I can't identify what type of trees those are. You do get some maintenance because those trees a lot of those leaves get dropped in the rocks, and then needing to clean that out can be a bit of a pain. But overall, I think the aesthetic's way better and the maintenance long-term is less. So just a good way to remove lawn and still have a really nice, lower maintenance, aesthetically pleasing landscape.
Yeah, no, that's a great one. We've got one more. This reminds me of the back of that building in Cole Harbor I was talking about, where it's
Nice.
just not nice. What were they dealing with? Like, what was that before?
Yeah, totally. Very similar story to my last one, but this one high shade. And so you probably, before we came in, was just like muddy all the time. It was garden, not all lawn. I think there was some lawn areas, but always battling that maintenance. Probably not getting a lot of success with the plants, even though we can get some shade plants for them, but I don't think they were thriving. And so we came in and just did river rock and crushed gravel. And what's nice is like this was an expensive job because it was a big area, but on a cost per square foot level, bringing in gravel, it like looks good. And you're not bringing in paving stones, you're not doing really like technical leveling work and cutting and all of that. And so we can quite quickly and cost effectively upgrade an area that, again, it's a win-win-win, right? It's looks better, it's less cost long term, and it's less maintenance. So it just, I think, really brought a lot of value to the client. I was also just going to say this one is maybe more unique, where I don't know off the top of my head. I'd imagine this was like a $30,000 job or something, but that last one like might have been a couple $1,000, and I think that's where we see a lot of value to the clients, right? Like, and I don't always know the budgets, but it's like, if your landscape maintenance bill is 50,000 and you can spend $3,000 to really improve an area as like a percentage of your landscape expenses, I think that brings a lot of bang for buck. Where something like this, obviously we like doing it and it brings a lot of value, but it'd probably be more of a one-time project and might incur, what do you call that when you have like a special levy or whatever? Like,
Yeah, if they don't have funds in their CRF, they need to do a
totally.
levy for it. But it is transformational.
Mhm.
You look at that first picture, and you do not get a good sense of appeal for this community's, backyard, and the after photo you do. So, that type of investment that is being made after seeing and living through what might have been a suboptimal landscape plan, I think is interesting. So,
Totally.
ticks the box for bang for buck for sure.
Yeah, I was just going to add one thing there. Sorry, I kind of cut you off, but
Yeah.
I caution our clients a little bit on these, and I don't want to downsell our work because I still think it's a great investment. But if you have landscapers coming in saying like, "Oh, put this river rock in, you're going to be a zero maintenance landscape," I would like that would raise a red flag to me. And just recognizing like some of this gravel is going to migrate into the river rock and vice versa. So periodically, you might need to bring a company in to like clean that up. Cleaning the leaves off it's going to be a bit of a pain, and so like that's going to be work for your landscapers. But I hear that a lot in the synthetic grass world where it's like you're going from 100% maintenance to 0% maintenance. And it's like, well, that still needs to be cleaned off. It still needs to be swept regularly. It's still like, shifting of edging material, all of that. So knowing that your listeners are, strata people, I would just say, yeah, especially I just hear that a lot in the industry. Go to this zero maintenance, and there's still some maintenance there, but hopefully less and hopefully a better.
Really great tip there, Dave. Going on a tangent, I went to Japan with my family this spring, and they have impeccable grounds. And
Yes.
to achieve that, they have brooms and sweep the moss and take the debris off of the moss and then off of the path. So when you're talking about that gravel and river rock mingling,
Mm-hmm.
there are teams of people dedicated to keeping that beauty over there. So
Totally.
I got a better appreciation for the effort that goes into creating that on that trip.
Yeah.
I think we've covered a bunch of the questions, but here's one that I'm trying to dial in, given our audience and our theme. When evaluating rates, what metric should a strata council use? Should they be looking at crew size, the number of hours, the years of experience? Like, how do they make that decision? And if they are wearing quotes that are 20, 30, 40% apart, not ridiculously apart, how do they measure?
Yeah, that's a great question, a difficult one because
Mhm.
ourselves included, we typically won't open the books to the client and say like we've accounted for 100 hours at this rate and whichever, because we want to protect ourselves in the event. Like I would say most of the time we actually put in more hours than we budget, and we're never going back to the client and saying like, oh, we went 20% over, here's your bill. But on that same thought, it's like, well, for under hours, we're not also being like, good news, we have a discount for you, right? And so we always worry that if we were to, it's our internal budget. If we were to share that, it might be used against us. And obviously not everybody will weaponize that, but just being careful. So that's a tough metric because usually you won't be able to get that out of companies. As far as crew size goes, again, a difficult metric because depending on the site, we might run it differently. Our default is 2-man crews. A bigger site, we might throw an extra person on. We might throw 2 crews of 2 people there. And then in the slower months, we might just send 1 crew. So it's also fluctuating. We're not going to say every week, 3 guys, 4 hours. We're quoting a standard we're going to hold it accountable to, and then we're going to do that however we see best fit. So to help these stratas, because everything I just said isn't helpful to your listeners, I would say like the professionalism that the person they meet with brings, right? So again, we did a renewal for a client and they got a contract from another company, and I read through the contract, and I don't know what company it was. I don't want to blast them or be unfair, but it was just kind of written up on like a Word document, and they just kind of listed things they talked about. And I was like, this gives me the impression that this company isn't experienced in landscaping because they're just putting down whatever you talked about. And like, I would imagine they don't have a plan. So if a client felt that way with seeing a contract, I would maybe, what's the word I'm looking for? Drill down a little bit with whoever that they met with from that company and just try to get an understanding of how they plan to, do their servicing. Where if you were to ask myself, when are you going to prune our dogwood hedges because you've included that? I'd be like, well, we do that usually in the late winter, typically during February, right? And so that would give an indicator that we've probably done this before. So I would ask that. I think, vehicles that are clean and are branded and look nice. I think that's a good indicator. I think the level of service they receive as far as like when they, made a request for quote, how quick does someone get in touch with them? How quick do they meet with them? How quick do they get the estimate out? Those are items I'd look for. And then we get it quite often too, where they just say like, do you have a reference we can use? And typically I have 2 or 3 property managers willing to vouch for us or people on council. And obviously it's a bit of an ask, but usually they're willing to be a referral. So all of those items come to mind. I think the professionalism that we display as far as how our company appears and communicates translates down to our level of service.
I think it does. I think that's reflected. I looked at your ratings. They're pretty good.
Yeah, we're doing good. I'm very thankful for
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think when I looked at the low end, it was because somebody had stopped and a truck was momentarily blocking a certain person's exit. These small things do happen in life, and you responded to that. So it's really great to see communication. We come back to all the time on Condo Talk about how important it is to communicate. So keeping that engagement, making sure that you're communicating, making sure that you've got that relationship manager who's accessible to the property manager and the strata council. I think that all helps to align the expectations and the delivery. And if anyone out there is contemplating what to do, or when you are contemplating how to handle your landscaping at your strata, do check out atkinsonlandscaping.ca. QR code is on your screen, and get in touch with Dave and the team, because they have a lot to share. You mentioned briefly just there, Dave, that you should pay attention as a strata to how quickly and how responsive teams are. What should somebody who reaches out to you expect in order for you to be able to get to them and provide a proposal? And where do you cover in the Lower Mainland?
Yeah, great question. If someone reaches out to us, typically we'll get back to them day of, if not the next day. And then pretty much the restraint on when we can meet with them is when our clients are free to meet, or, they want to get everyone on strata there. So, but our turnaround time is quite quick. If it's a larger strata or there's more needs, sometimes it takes a few days to put a quote together, because there's more, calculations and estimating on those. And then as far as service area, we're located in on like the Surrey Langley border. We're in Cloverdale, and then we service Cloverdale, South Surrey, Langley. Those would be like primary service areas. But for strata work, we will basically go anywhere within, I want to say, the Lower Mainland. Like, we're probably not going to Squamish, but like if a site has a day, it's like maybe we can send a crew of 3 there for a full day once a week, we're much more willing to expand our area. I want to say right now the furthest east site we have is Aldergrove, Abbotsford, and the furthest west is Coquitlam, Burnaby area. So anywhere in between there, we're pretty good to service. But most of our work is Surrey, Langley, South Surrey, White Rock region.
Excellent. Well, Dave, I appreciate you joining me today to talk through Strata Landscaping, some of the issues they should consider, and how to get bang for buck. We'll have you back in the future to give us an update and to talk about some of the other unique aspects of what Strata should care about.
Yeah.
But for now, I wanted to thank you for joining me, and let everyone know that Condo Talks will return in the new year.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for having me on.